Kimi Antonelli wins the Monaco Grand Prix. The teenager can't stop winning in Formula One. That's 5 in a row.
Get in there, Kimi. That was a masterclass, mate. First Monaco win.
George tried to play some mind games with him coming into the weekend. Kimi handled that really well.
The records keep on coming, and I think you can't deny that when you are looking at the words like generational talent.
Fearless and peerless. I can't think of two other words to describe him.
It's very hard for George not to feel victimised by the bad luck that he's had.
I worry that George is one of these drivers that overthinks things.
This was supposed to be his opportunity, and I wonder how much that is sitting in his head.
He used the word bamboozled, didn't he?
It's a very George Russell word.
Yes,
I do enjoy that.
Lewis Hamilton with back-to-back second places.
He likes to say, I need to remind myself of who I am. And it feels like he now knows exactly who he is.
Oh, but into the wall and out of the race, Charles Leclerc.
There's a sort of hero or zero nature to him, certainly here. It's misery or magic, isn't it?
A late red flag gave us big drama at the end of the Monaco Grand Prix, but Kimi Antonelli overcame all the chaos and kept his cool to secure his 5th Grand Prix victory in a row and extend his championship lead to a huge 66 points. Welcome everyone to F1 Nation. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me in the Monte Carlo paddock is F1 TV lead presenter Laura Winter and F1 correspondent Lawrence Barretto. First up, Laura, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm excellent after that one. That was just ridiculous. Ludicrous, I think, was my initial reaction. That's the word I used in the show. Just what was going on? Major DNFs for the likes of Norris, Leclerc on home soil yet again. You've got Kimi's otherworldliness around the hardest racetrack there is. And then it just was ridiculous, wasn't it? From start to finish. And we expect Monaco to be somewhat of a procession at times, and the race can kind of not live up to the qualifying hype the day before, but we got a bit of everything this weekend.
Yeah, it was kind of peak Monaco all weekend, I felt, Lawrence. I mean, what was the headline for you after this one?
I think the headline was that there were so many stories to tell from a Monaco Grand Prix. I think every driver I talked to in the TV pen, there was something to talk to them about. They didn't have an anonymous race because, to Laura's point, they were affected by something, whether that was a penalty or they had an overtake or they were able to make progress in the race. So for me, the highlight, I guess, ultimately was Kimi Antonelli stamping his authority at a track where I think we used to talk about only the greats win at Monaco, and I think for Kimi to have done it and in such commanding fashion was astonishing.
Well, he's now the youngest driver in F1 history to take a Grand Slam, right? And he's done it at Monaco. I mean, what have we learned about Kimi Antonelli this weekend that we didn't already know?
I used the word fearless earlier. I think we felt he was fearless in Canada, that he was driving without fear, with complete abandon, that he just was behind the car and he would put it in places it shouldn't be. He'd skittle over the grass and still try and get the overtake done against his teammates, sometimes against team orders almost. He'd argue the point on the radio. But then to come to Monaco, where the pressure mounts here in a different way, to put in that lap in qualifying in the manner in which we saw him do, and then today, I think you can so easily say Monaco is a race that can be won. If you're on pole, well, obviously you're going to win. And look, the pole to win ratio is much higher here by virtue of it being so hard to overtake on. But he had to absorb so much pressure. He had a safety car restart. He had a second standing start. Firstly, against a 4-time world champion who ultimately didn't get off the line. I felt a bit shortchanged after that. I'm quite glad we got a second one. And that was against a 7-time world champion and a man whose seat at Mercedes he took on, and he absorbed all of it, pulled out a 5-second gap on Lewis in the final few laps and pumped in the fastest lap of the Grand Prix as well. Even Bono's trying to hold him back. There's just this fearlessness to him, this youthful exuberance that is wonderful, but it's such a stark contrast to the Kimi we saw this time last year, who embarked on a run of races in which he scored 3 points in 9 races. He came to the media pen in Belgium in tears. He looked absolutely gutted at times last season, and there were questions around his contract. And the Kimi we're seeing now is wildly different to that.
I think it helps that he's got a good car, and I think that puts him out of a lot of the difficult positions he was finding himself in last year. But there were two things that really impressed me here. Was George tried to play some mind games with him coming into the weekend, saying the pressure's all on Kimi, and I think Kimi handled that really well. To Laura's point, this is only his second season. He doesn't really have this kind of experience of the big boys maybe try to put pressure on him, and I think he handled that really well. And then the other one was that Friday was a difficult day for them. Like, they were nowhere with the balance. They didn't really understand why the car was going in slow corners and the rear was stepping out. And then we went into Saturday, and it was Kimi who had unlocked the potential of this Mercedes, and George hadn't. And that should be the opposite way round in theory, if you look at like the core paperwork and the stats and stuff. And I think for Kimi to be able to kind of recover through a weekend at a European race where he struggled at last year, I think is significant.
I asked Toto actually about where this version of Kimi that we're seeing is coming from, where this another planet level is coming from that we're seeing. And I mentioned his age, and I mentioned last season, and he said he thinks actually it is his age. That is one of the reasons why he is able to drive
an advantage.
So freely. It's an advantage. And I think it can be both a disadvantage in inexperience, but that inexperience in itself means you're not weighed down by expectation. You're not weighed down by, oh God, 2 years ago here I did this, and oh, I'm expecting to do this, and I've got these habits that now I need to fit into this new car. It seems that actually his age means he doesn't have those fears, he doesn't have the hang-ups, he doesn't have the monkey on his back in any sense. He's just able to drive so freely.
And he has a brilliant group of people around him. I
He's
think
been
that's
nurtured from the
crucial,
start.
right?
Yeah, for
nurtured
sure.
from the start.
Yeah.
I think paternal is the word I'd use to describe his relationship with Toto, and of course his old man Marco is there as well. He's just, fearless and peerless. I can't think of sort of two other words to describe him. His peak was higher this weekend than I was expecting. How about you guys?
No, I don't think so, because I think the form that he showed up until this point...
He was pulling a second and a half per lap over the field at some point.
But I think what we've seen in the last four races was enough to suggest this was coming. Like, I just think that what he's done in China and Japan and Miami and Canada, I think we're almost forgetting how good that was, because he's gone and done it again. And I take your point that he was doing things around the streets of Monaco that, we've seen Charles Leclerc do in the past and the legends and the greats do. But I'm not surprised, because I felt that it was coming. I think he's shown enough of what he's done so far this year to show that it was possible. And I really think that when he came into this weekend and he heard George saying, it's his to lose, he would have thought, actually, no, I don't think it is. And that probably drove him on even more this weekend. I think it probably was that extra fire that you need around here, where you go into this trance and then you're able to deliver the kind of qualifying lap that he was able to do yesterday, and the race performance today. And I thought he handled Bono telling him to slow down very well, because he ignored him, but then did what he was told initially. And I think he's learning all of this. We're seeing someone learn in the limelight, aren't we? And I think that's quite an exciting prospect going forward.
Is it too early to say we're looking at a generational talent?
I don't think so. It's so easy to say, because look, last year we had Oscar Piastri winning that world title, didn't we? Then Lando Norris had won it. Then Max Verstappen almost won it. The swings that we saw last season mean that I think we can never quite rest on our laurels. And I think to your point before about his peak being higher, we're sort of, when you see this level of brilliance, you're almost expecting, he's got to drop the level at some point. He can't continue at this high level. We saw Kimi last year, obviously, with very up and down performances. So you sort of expect this will be the weekend where perhaps things don't quite go his way. But we're not seeing that. Certainly, at the moment, everything that we are seeing indicates that he is the generational talent that Toto has believed in from the very, very beginning, and that so many questioned. I think I would say, myself included, last season, whether it was just too soon for him. And he is firmly answering every critic of his rookie season.
Yeah, I don't think it's too soon. I'm on the hype train, because I think that we've seen so many different circuits now and so many different pressure points, from the way he handles a race weekend to the way that he handles George's pressure on him, to the way that when McLaren was strong in that Miami phase of the weekend, he handled that really well, to the pressure that he handled when Toto was tough on him. I think he's just, everything that anyone throws at him, he doesn't seem phased this year. And I think with that in mind, and that he's going up against someone, can't forget, George Russell is a very good racer driver. He was probably in the top 3, if not top 2 drivers on pure quality last year. So we can't forget that. And he hasn't suddenly got worse overnight. So I actually think the more significant thing is that he's doing it to George. We all thought George was that overwhelming favourite, I think, coming into this year. I think he thought he was as well. And I think the job that he's doing against him is probably what really marks him out as a generational talent after, 6 races of this campaign?
Do you know, even if Kimi Antonelli doesn't win this World Championship, I've seen enough. I've seen enough to believe that he is a generational talent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but I think then there is that caveat of we thought that Oscar was on course to win the title last year, then he had that really difficult spot, and then McLaren didn't have a good car this year, and now it's the question of, well, where does Oscar stack up in this pecking order that we've got? So I think that I think you're right that I think he's a generational talent, but I think it will be particularly tough on Kimi because of the things we just described. He's a family person, having people around him is important. Emotionally, I think it will be quite tough for him if he builds this massive lead and he loses it. I'm not saying he is going to, I'm just saying if that happens, then I think it'll be actually extra tough on him because of his personality. So then maybe if he comes out the other side, yeah, he's even more of a generational talent than we thought he was right now.
I think also he's making history at every turn, right? The youngest to lead the World Championship, the youngest to ever win in Monaco, the only teenager to ever win in Monaco. He's equalled Lewis's record of 5 consecutive wins with Mercedes now. He's the first driver in history to win his first 5 consecutively. The records keep on coming, and I think you can't deny that when you are looking at the words like generational talent.
This episode is sponsored by Indeed. You just realised your business needed to hire someone yesterday. So how do you find the right candidate fast? Easy. You use Indeed. Instead of your job post getting buried in a sea of listings, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire faster. Your listing jumps to the top of search results so the right candidates see it first. And it really works. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed get 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscription, no long-term contract. You only pay for results. One of the things I love about Indeed is how quick and efficient it is. Hiring can feel overwhelming, but with sponsored jobs, the process moves faster and you attract stronger candidates. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a £100 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/F1Nation. Just go to Indeed.com/F1Nation right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/F1Nation. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. The contrast from one side of the Mercedes garage to the other couldn't be more extreme than it is right now. I mean, first of all, let's talk about the problems George Russell had over this Monaco Grand Prix weekend. It felt like he just lacked confidence. Was there more to it than that? Was there just confirmed to us, Lawrence, that there wasn't a car issue? It was much more subtle than that.
It must have been more subtle than that because I think George hasn't mentioned a car issue. He hasn't said that there was anything wrong with what he had as a package. He's actually just saying that he doesn't understand why it's going wrong, which is, so it's a more confusion rather than there's something certainly wrong. I think what I feel for George is that I think he thought he came back here, heading into the European season when Kimi had struggled so much, this would probably be the start of maybe that run. They were going to head to Spain, a more conventional track, Austria, Silverstone. He'd build the momentum back, 16, 17 races to go. And that hasn't happened. And I think what would have been a bit of a sucker punch is from Friday into Saturday, when the team made all these changes to the balance of the car, they got it performing, they made it much softer basically over the bumps, so they could attack it. Kimi could do that and George couldn't, and I think that would hurt him because I think he's trying to do all the right things and it's not making sense, and I think that's why he's so annoyed. He said in the TV pen, if I was making the mistakes or I knew it was wrong, this is fine because it's just annoying, bad luck, whatever, but he's not doing any of that. And he's still struggling, and I think that's what's hurting him at the minute and why it's so confusing.
He used the word bamboozled, didn't he? After
It's a very George Russell word. Yes, I do enjoy that.
I worry that George is one of these people, one of these drivers that overthinks things. And I'm taken back to something Damon Hill said to me once, which was, you drive at your best when you're not thinking about it, when it all just comes completely naturally. And that makes me think about Kimi Antonelli, right? His age, fearless.
Flow state,
and I
isn't
think
it?
the more it's becoming hard for George, the more he then becomes more introverted and is looking for answers the whole time. You're then thinking about what you're doing in the car. He's saying he's going to have to change his driving style to suit these 2026 cars, and I just worry that it's just actually going to spiral and get worse and worse and worse. If anything, he needs to do the opposite. Stop thinking about it and just revert back to the karting George Russell, age 15, who just went out there and did it, and let Marcus, your engineer, sort out the car.
Drivers overdrive, don't they? When they are pushing and fighting for tenths and milliseconds, they think, I need to push harder in the car and therefore overdrive and then ultimately go slower. You so often hear that. And interestingly, Damon said to us as well yesterday, he said that when he got pole around here, he barely felt like he was driving. It came so naturally. It was so much an extension of himself that he wasn't pushing in any sense. We were comparing him to Charles Leclerc, who ended up in the wall twice this weekend. But it's that kind of feeling, isn't it? And so if George now is going to be in his head, which of course he is, and it's very hard, and you used the word victimised, or sorry, Greg used the word victimised, our other colleague with F1 on the website, who it's very hard for George not to feel victimised by the bad luck that he's had, safety car timing in Japan, and then Canada, a DNF, that all begins to mount up, and then suddenly you're looking at 68 points in 2 Grand Prix, almost 3 Grand Prix behind Kimi.
The overthinking thing makes me think of Daniel Ricciardo. When he went at Renault and he was at McLaren, and he was an overthinker, and he would just get himself in a muddle on a Friday when he would go down various paths, and then he would get confused, and then another race weekend was gone, and it happened, and it spiraled at McLaren. And so I think George has got to be really cognizant of that. I think he's got to really understand that he can't allow himself to go down that path. And what I feel particularly for George is he's done everything right in his career. Like, he delivered everything he needed to at Williams. He's come to Mercedes and outperformed Lewis Hamilton, the greatest driver that's ever driven for that team, possibly even the sport. And then this was supposed to be his opportunity, and I wonder how much that is sitting in his head. And he knows all too well how things can spiral. And if you don't take your one shot, this might be it. Like, George Russell might lose the title this year and never win the title.
Are you putting pressure, even more pressure on George Russell?
I'm just... Well,
no, I get your
probably
point.
by sideways, yes, I am, but I'm not intentionally trying to do that. It's just the
Lawrence,
reality of the situation.
Both of you, where does he go from here?
There's a question of the contract as well, no? Because so much of last season and the beginning of this season was, will Max Verstappen go to Mercedes? And George was having to refute that time and time again last year, and actually said, well, if Max does come to Mercedes, it won't be me who leaves. I remember him saying that. I think it was Silverstone. He was very clear on that. They then both got contracts for the year, and Mercedes have set out their stall, and he comes into this year as the favourite, naturally, as the more experienced driver. But there'll be caveats to that contract. There'll be clauses that will enable both to get out. And Max Verstappen, we're sitting on the Red Bull Energy Station, but he may well be questioning his future at Red Bull. He's said he's intending to stay in Formula One. He's repeated he wants to stay at Red Bull. But if Mercedes come with him with too good an offer to miss in a car that is that good, is he going to turn them down? And then where does George Russell go? Are we talking about George Russell not just race to race losing out to his teammate, but actually his career and his trajectory and his future, possibly? Do
you think Max Verstappen is on the phone to Toto Wolff about a Mercedes seat next year? Do you remember there was that very public display in Canada of Jos Verstappen sitting with Toto Wolff outside the Mercedes hospitality area so that we could all see? Ostensibly to talk about the Nürburgring 24 hours, but I'm sure there was more to it than that.
But there was also the shots of Max walking down the pit lane with Toto before the race, I remember. Yeah. So look, they're smart people, and to be honest, if they want to talk, they're definitely not going to do their talking in front of us. Do I think he's on the phone to Toto? No, but do I think that they are both casually going to talk about it over the course of the year, like they probably have done for several years? Yeah, of course I think they're going to do that, because Max ultimately wants to be in a position to fight for wins. His initial radio response today, when he obviously didn't get off the line, he was furious, not directly at what the team had done, but furious at the fact that he didn't get the shot of fighting for the win, and I think he thought he could have won this race. So I think ultimately that's all that Max really cares about. And to Laura's point, if Mercedes have got the best car, why on earth would he not back himself to beat Kimi? Because I think all three of us know Max Verstappen believes he can beat anybody, so he would love and relish the opportunity to go.
But isn't that
Kimi.
the crucial point? If you're Toto Wolff, why would you put Kimi up against Max Verstappen?
It's a generational talent versus a generational talent.
I mean, it's the fight we want to see.
Blockbuster, please.
Yeah, that's Senna Prost
I want to see
territory,
it.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
No, you're right. Is that an intra-teammate rivalry one step too far?
I still think Max is the one that got away from Toto. I just don't think he can let go of that. I just feel like he will want it.
But hasn't he got his own Max now in Kimi?
Which is great, and Kimi could be around for the next 15 years, 20 years, who knows? But what's the harm in putting him up against Max for a couple of years? I mean, it's
It'd be
just
cinema, wouldn't it?
It would
I'd
be
love
box
it.
office, wouldn't it? Yeah. But returning to the point, I think Laura's right that that's got to be in George's mind, right? It's got to be in his mind that last year he backed himself to keep the seat over Kimi. This year, how on earth can you replace a driver that's won 5 races on the row, has built up a championship lead like that? George will know that. That's just reality, isn't it? So that's going to only add more pressure to him. But then the caveat is we are about to go to a racetrack in Barcelona, which is the most conventional of them all, and that might be what George needs. He might just need to go to a normal racetrack, have a normal setup from the start of the weekend, and build through a weekend and have one good result to stop the rot. That might just be what he needs. So I'm going to say one more. Let's have one more weekend before we completely rule him out.
Well, what about Ferrari? It was definitely a game of two halves for them. Let's deal with Lewis Hamilton first. His second consecutive second place. He's now got a little bit of momentum inside that team.
He does. And isn't it lovely to see? I think everybody, whether you're a Lewis fan or not, nobody likes to see a great driver struggling in the manner that we saw Lewis struggling last season. And you would have, in that media pen, had many an interview in which you were getting precisely nothing from him because he was
tough ones.
because he was emotional and he was sick of it and he was done and he was unhappy and so many people were questioning, should he retire, could he retire, is this the end for Lewis Hamilton? And I just feel like a career like Lewis's, for it to peter out to a complete nothing at the end of last season in a car that he couldn't get on with would have just been awful, wouldn't it? So it is wonderful to see that he kind of feels like he's back to sort of the Lewis of old, or perhaps a new era for Lewis Hamilton, but that he's hustling, he's pushing, there's energy in his voice when he's on the radio, he wants more and more, he's hungry. He has a hunger even at this stage in his career, and it's amazing to see. It gives Ferrari a bit of a problem. Lewis Hamilton's now P2 in the championship, he's ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc, he's been ahead of him the last 2 weekends, and he's now in the ascendancy.
I feel Lewis Hamilton is enjoying Formula One more this year than he has any time since 21, probably pre-Abu Dhabi obviously, but I feel you look at the body language of the car, you look at his answers, the energy you talk about, Laura, it's the happiest I've seen him in a work environment for a good 5 years.
Oh, I'd agree with that. I think 2021 was the last time we saw that kind of Lewis. I think the hybrid turbo era from 2022 onwards killed Lewis in a way, because Mercedes just couldn't develop a car that suited him or gave him the one to go and fight at the front of permanently. I think that what has impressed me most this year is Lewis talks about building this team around him. He's got a race engineer in Carlo Santi that he clearly loves and has this, like, what did he describe him as? Like a Bono, Italian Bono. Like, he has that kind of relationship that he needs. But today he said something in the pen where he said that he was fighting Fred all year long. I need this in the car, I need that on the car, I need to do this, I need to do that. And he was like, Fred had to push really hard. Like, and we know how hard I think Ferrari can be to maybe change the way they normally do things, and that's probably been their Achilles heel over the last, 2 decades while they wait for a world championship. So I think it's significant that Fred has been able to push through whatever these things are that is making Lewis more comfortable. And Lewis has been at pains to at least say that today. And I think when he's got that environment around him, he's got someone who's fighting for him again, fighting for what he wants and believes in him. And in Fred, it's kind of like a father figure again, I think, because Fred really, really believes that Lewis has still got what it takes. And I think that he's been able to do that. He's got the race engineer that he likes, and he's now got a car that he's fed into of course the results help, and the reg change has helped Ferrari move up the pack, but I think that's really helped him remind himself that he can do it, and then he feels more comfortable in the environment, which means that we get Lewis Hamilton performances that we've had this weekend in Monaco.
He likes to say, I need to remind myself of who I am, doesn't he? He needs to remind himself that he is Lewis Hamilton, and I've seen clips of fans saying that to him, remember who you are. And he really needed that last year, and it feels like he now knows exactly who he is, and he's Lewis Hamilton, he's back. Okay, it's been 2 races. I think, we tend to swing, don't we, when we talk about drivers, if they've run a good run, but it's been 2 great race weekends for him, and generally there's been a massive upward trend all season.
And he uses every opportunity to remind us how much he's loving it. I don't know if it was the same with you this weekend on F1 TV, but he certainly in every press conference, he started after qualifying and after the race to say, I am so enjoying being back here. I'm loving it. It's such a privilege, to be racing in front of this crowd. He's at that level of enjoying it.
Because I think people are starting to write him off, and that irritates him, because I think he believes that he's got what it takes, and I don't think he likes it when people, where maybe he perceives they don't have all the information and then they're just making random comments about his ability. And so I think he has made a conscious effort, particularly in Canada and into this weekend, of saying, I'm here to stay. In Canada, he said, I'm not going anywhere, you can't retire me. And then here, talking about how much he loves it, because I think he just wants to remind everyone publicly, maybe he wants to remind everyone within the team as well, that how much he's loving it, and also the rivals, that he won't be pushed around. And I think we saw that great battle he had with Max in Canada. That was the first time in ages we've seen him kind of battle a contemporary. All of these things are adding up, right, to making him a stronger proposition. And Lewis is very good at mind games in a positive way, right? He understands that it's the whole package that you need to deliver, and that's what he's doing right now.
Talking of the package, why couldn't Ferrari take the fight to Mercedes? Because I think coming into the weekend we all thought they were favourites, and yet they never turned it on.
That is a good question. I think they felt coming into this weekend the lack of power that they struggle with would be less of a pain here. I don't think they thought they would be the best, but I think they thought that they could be the best in qualifying, which obviously would unlock the potential in the race. I think what they just didn't do as well was they didn't react as well overnight from Friday into Saturday. I think they started with a good baseline car, which is why they were strong in FP1 and FP2. Mercedes started on the back foot, just made that bigger step than Ferrari were able to do over into Saturday. And obviously once qualifying's lost, it's over. Let's not forget, Charles was on course to take pole, maybe, if he hadn't binned it at Tabac.
Yeah, was he? He was green and purple, wasn't he?
Exactly. And then, actually, we could be talking about a completely different thing today, couldn't we? Because if he had started on pole, probably would have won the race. And then we would have talking about something completely different. So, well, as long as the brakes weren't a problem, I guess.
I think the argument with Leclerc, the guys were making on our post show and post quali show, is if he's having to drive the car in a manner in which he's hitting the wall twice in qualifying, then he's overdriving it, is he not? He's needing to push beyond the limit to get a potential pole position out of it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But we know that that's how Charles drives. He always has. He's such a one-lap specialist. He's brilliant, but it feels like there's a sort of hero or zero nature to him. Certainly here, it's misery or magic, isn't it? Here in Monaco.
And coming into this weekend after a disappointing Canadian Grand Prix for
his
Charles.
worst ever weekend in Ferrari colours, he said.
Yeah. So he must have been on an emotional roller coaster, because he has the Montreal worst weekend in Formula 1. He then signs his new contract with Ferrari. So you've got the low of Montreal, the high of the new contract, and kind of where was it going to go from there? And I think on Friday night we were all thinking, okay, God, I can't wait to see Charles Leclerc do his thing in qualifying. And then, as you say, he then hits the wall twice. Brake issues was something that plagued him for most of the weekend.
So he actually said in the TV pen he had a bit of a dilemma coming into this weekend, in that he knew that there was a problem with the brakes. There was a fix, but he didn't want to enter the Monaco Grand Prix weekend with a fix. So he opted to stick with the original brake setup that he's got. And I think he hoped that the specialty that he's kind of built up with this pace would be enough to carry him through. But to Laura's point and the boys on the show, it forced him into overdriving it that milli% of what it would be, and that was what caused the problem. So I think positively it just means that he is going to be able to go to Spain with a fix. So I think he's hopeful that when he gets to Spain it won't be so much of a problem.
Well, he said after the race that I'm going to do what Lewis is doing with the brakes, which strikes me as a good thing to do, because Lewis has always been really good on the brakes. So it's been one of his fortes as a racing driver.
But I think we can't forget that up until the point in which he struggled in Canada, Charles was having a good season. So I can understand why you might not want to make a change for it and naturally converge on what your teammate's doing. I think what is key now is he's realised that reasonably quickly, and it's going to move back to a spot where hopefully that will give him that comfort. And then we could have a really cool Titanic battle between them.
But that would be an intra-team battle, because, I mean, do we think Ferrari have the pace to take it to Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship? Mercedes are now on 244 points, Ferrari on 165 in P2.
I think it feels to me the fight is more for P2. So the fight is more, can Ferrari better McLaren, or are McLaren the closest threat? It feels to me we're seeing Mercedes do what McLaren did last season, and they will just move steadily, firmly, very quickly away from the rest of the field, and that fight for P2 will be on between Ferrari and McLaren.
Before we move on from Charles, I'd love to get both of your thoughts on why you think he's extended with Ferrari and why now. It wasn't like it was up for renewal at the end of this year, so why the need to do it now?
Well, I think the driving market's going to go into flux in the next couple of years. I think what is interesting is that Charles has built up this love affair with Ferrari. I think he wants to win a world championship with them, and I think by signing this commitment early doors, he is committing to them in the hope that they commit to him and hopefully generate and reinvigorate the team around him in the future. The contract, as I understand it, ran up until the end of 2027. This one takes him until the end of 2029. If you look at McLaren, they're reasonably set. If you look at Red Bull, they're reasonably set with the junior family that they've got. And if you look at Mercedes, we've talked about Max already, he's not going to get in there. So what other options did he have? There was some chatter about Aston Martin, but Aston Martin are at the back. So that's just not an option for the foreseeable future. So I think the best thing for him to do would be to take a better deal, kind of nail his colours to the mast, and try and remind the team that this is what he came here for. This is what he wants to do with Ferrari, and he wants to win the World Championship with them. And I don't actually think they need that, because I think they love him at Ferrari. But I think it was significant for him to sign this deal, get in early, and then he doesn't have to think or talk about it now for the foreseeable. And let's not forget, Formula 1 driver contracts, you can get out of them. So if he really needs to, he can get out of it. But I think it's a really good statement of intent to do that deal.
Yeah, I agree with Lawrence. I think we don't know the other options he had, and it doesn't sound like he had any option that was as good as Ferrari. And so he is Ferrari's man. It would be such a pull for him to leave. It would feel such an odd time at the start of a new era of regs for him to start making moves elsewhere. I don't know. I see your point that his contract wasn't really particularly up for renewal, and so I think the option isn't elsewhere, so you can't foresee what's going to happen in the future, and stick with what you've got. Stick or twist, and he's stuck.
This episode is sponsored by Saily. One thing I've learned from travelling around the world with this show is that the first few minutes after you land are often the most important. You're checking directions, looking up transport, finding hotel details, messaging family back home to let them know you've arrived safely, and all of that depends on having a reliable data connection straight away. And that's why I like using Saily. Saily is an eSIM app from the creators of NordVPN that gives you affordable mobile data in over 200 destinations. So instead of worrying about roaming charges or trying to find a local SIM card when you arrive, you can connect almost immediately and get on with exploring. And what I really like is that you only need to install the eSIM once. So it's perfect for one trip, or if you're jetting off again, you can travel between countries and stay connected simply by adding a new data plan. Saily also includes built-in security features, like a VPN and ad blocking, which helps protect your browsing and can even reduce mobile data usage by stopping ads from loading. And if you travel frequently like I do, they also offer the Saily Ultra plan, which includes extra perks like airport lounge access, fast-track services and priority support. So download the Saily app in your app store, use the code F1Nation at checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. Well, we're sat on the Red Bull Energy Station. The music is pumping. We've just seen the two Racing Bulls drivers walk past us drenched. They've been in the pool. Isaac Hadjar is behind us with his trophy, having his picture taken. I mean, it was a pretty immense weekend for Isaac. He was having problems with that car, and he kept a pretty cool head to get his first podium for the team.
Yeah, I think there are multiple things this weekend that's impressed me. The first one was when he crashed early in the weekend. Normally you tend to spiral as a young driver, and Isaac didn't. He got back on track, and I remember talking to Paul Monahan after FP2 on Friday, and he was like, that thing really surprised him in the way that Isaac was able to go back on track and get that confidence back quite quickly. Yeah, I think he was about a second off the ultimate pace, but he was still back up to where a Red Bull should be. And ultimately that's all Red Bull really want, is the second seat to do that. And then today, I know he seemed pretty irritated throughout the race. Number of team radios. I imagine the team are probably going to ask him to curb some of those because it was pretty relentless, wasn't it, through the race. But I think it shows how much of an opportunity he saw today. I think he sensed the opportunity to get a podium. He kind of managed all of those issues that he had today really impressively in a way that we haven't seen the driver in the second seat at Red Bull do very often over the last couple of years. And he's had a lot of bad luck this year. She started P3 in Australia, should have probably fought for a podium there. He's had some unreliability as well, and so it hasn't really gone his way. But again, he hasn't let that faze him, and that's why I think Red Bull were so keen to promote him into this seat, and why I think they thought he would be different. And I think on the evidence of today alone, or this weekend at least as a whole, I think he's shown that.
He's had a few retirements this season already, hasn't he, when you look at his results? But he mentioned the drivability of the car, didn't he? And he said on the radio at the end, why do we make this so difficult for ourselves? But to your point about the team radio, we know that that's what Isaac Hadjar has in the locker. He can get vocal on the radio. We saw it in F2 and in previous seasons in sport categories. But he's driving around Monaco and he might get a P3 and the car is giving up on him and not giving him the power he wants. You cannot blame the guy for getting a bit stressed and a bit emotional at times for that. And I think the team did such a brilliant job of handling that as well, saying, we are working on a fix, we haven't got it, get your head down, that you're still in this. You're still in this. And obviously he also had, I don't know how aware he was actually of the red flag infringement hanging over him and the safety car investigation hanging over him as well. But cool head right to the end and crossing the line, obviously behind Gasly, but knowing that penalty was there. What a result.
I think it would always be okay if you do those radio messages and you don't make mistakes, and I think to that point he didn't do that today, did he? He didn't let it get to him, he didn't let the red mist descend. So I think so long as he always delivers results, the team won't be that frustrated with him. I guess it's only if it ever gets to a point where it boils over that it will become a problem. But yeah, I think you put it well, Laura, like he smashed it.
He feels more and more convincing as a Red Bull driver almost by the race.
But then I also talked to someone earlier who reminded me that obviously this is a more drivable Red Bull. So I think that it's not so obvious when you're just a little bit off. I think that last year the field was much more compressed. So the smallest mistake would knock you out early doors in qualifying. You'd be down out of the top 10. Whereas this year the field is a bit more spread. And so it hides that. Look, that's not taking anything away from Isaac. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. But I think that he does have that fortune this year, and he's making the most of it.
Well, look, what about Max Verstappen? Without the car problems, could he have taken the fight to Kimi Antonelli, or do you think Antonelli was just gone?
That's a good question. I think because it's Max Verstappen, he could have taken the fight to him. I don't know how that would have materialised, whether that would have been 30 or 40 laps of relentless pressure, and maybe Kimi would have held on. Maybe he would have held on in the way that he did in Miami against Lando. But I think that we were robbed of it and we'll never know. But I think the fact that Max was so irritated on team radio straight afterwards, the way he was so disappointed in the TV pen, makes me think that maybe he could have done. But then it's so hard to pass in Monaco, isn't it? It's so hard to make something happen. I remember Jolyon said in comms quite early on, he was like, I think we might get some overtaking in this race.
I love Jolyon's optimism. He was really invested in this Rascasse line, and then we kept going through it lap after lap, and he was going, I don't think the Rascasse line's giving as much opportunity as I anticipated.
What did he mean about the Rascasse line? What, 2 different lines through there?
He thought that there was a line through in which you could get an overtake done. That was where he saw a primary overtaking spot. If you weren't to get it done at the start, or of course you weren't to do it on strategy. And I think Kimi Antonelli's, if you are going to mark his homework and go through his season, his starts have been the primary concern. They obviously made steps as a team with Mercedes to improve those, but Max Verstappen hasn't had an easy time with starts this season either in these new cars. And so to have the 2 of them off the line with the fast Ferraris behind, you felt, God, could Lewis get this? So I was gutted that Max didn't get off the line. I think he got off the line pretty well in Canada. I think we could have seen the same again. I really wanted to see that battle down into turn 1, and then whether he could have just put the pressure on Kimi, forced a mistake maybe. It didn't feel like Kimi was going to make a mistake today though. He was inch perfect everywhere, wasn't he?
We've mentioned reliability. It feels a race doesn't go by without us talking about McLaren's lack of reliability. I mean, neither car made it to the start back in China, and then of course Lando Norris had his DNF, who didn't finish today. I mean, okay, Piastri ended up P4, but it was just, they were a little bit off all weekend, whether it's reliability, whether it was pace. Lawrence, on the pace front, were you surprised? Did you expect more from McLaren?
Well, if you talk to the team ahead of this weekend, they would tell you that actually they didn't expect much more than they got. They were expecting a more difficult weekend. But I think what we are seeing of McLaren here and in the last race, particularly in Canada as well, it's very unlike the McLaren that we've become used to since 2023. They normally bring an upgrade, it delivers a percentage of time, and they move forward, whereas they brought this upgrade package to Canada, they took the front wing off, they tried it again here, they took it off. The upgrade didn't deliver the step that they hoped in Canada. They've come here, and it does feel like they're just chasing it a little bit, because obviously they came into the season with an underdeveloped car, so they already knew that they were on the back foot. And I think in their strategy to chase, I think they've maybe not been able to get the most out of the package that they've brought as quickly as possible, in the same way that obviously Mercedes and Ferrari have managed to do it. And then you've always got Red Bull in the background randomly bringing bits and pieces that allow them, for example, this weekend to get themselves in the mix, So I don't think McLaren will be surprised at where they were, but I think they'll be surprised at how far off they were. And I do think that the number of reliability issues that are happening now, and the fact that they are mostly different, will become a concern if it continues in this way.
Because Norris parked up in FP2, didn't he? And they changed the energy store, the battery within his allocation. So you're also getting to a point where if they're continuing to have these reliability problems, eventually we're going to see grid penalties for taking parts out of allocation. Oh, maths. We've got 16 races to go this season. That's a long way to go to start thinking and talking about grid penalties. But if you also look, George had an issue obviously in Canada, Norris has had an issue here and in Canada. Are there then questions with the Mercedes power units, the Mercedes powered cars as well? Does it raise questions around reliability across the grid if it's across 2 different teams with the Mercedes PU? I don't know.
Laurie, your first time on the show this year, because you've been busy being a mum, I would love to get your thoughts on Lando Norris. Do you see, just in the 2 races since you've been back, do you see a different Lando since he became world champion? More relaxed?
More relaxed, for sure. He's more relaxed. I think the highs and lows probably feel a little less high and a little less low. So where in a title fight or in an era in which he was chasing wins or chasing that first title, 2 weekends on the bounce like this would have felt horrible. He can take it on the chin because no one can ever take away from him the fact that he's a world champion. And so I do think there's an element that, yes, he'll be gutted. He's still going to be hungry, absolutely. I don't think he'd be turning up and doing this if he still didn't want it. But there is probably a contentment within him knowing that he is a world champion. It's still so fresh as well.
he's achieved his lifetime ambition and everything else is a bonus.
I have questioned, generally, as I've sat at home watching with my baby, the mentality to come back after doing just that. You've achieved your lifelong ambition and you've got to rock up in testing in Barcelona in a brand new car and do it again. I wonder how drivers who have gone to the absolute limit, the way we saw those 3 go to the limit in Abu Dhabi, 1 gets over the line. How do you motivate yourself again? Where does the hunger come from? Does it come from the fact that you're world champion and that you feel unbeatable, you're motivated to win, the way that we know Max Verstappen is, for example? I'm sure it comes from somewhere within Lando, but I just question how difficult that may be for some drivers or not.
I compare Lando to, say, Nico Rosberg. Nico Rosberg had that really tough year, didn't he? That battle with Lewis to eventually win the world title in 2016. But he'd obviously gone through a long period of time of never being able to do it. And I think that at that point he realised, okay, that's where my level is, I guess. And then with Lando, I imagine he would have had that conversation with himself over the winter and has come back and gone, actually, no, I still quite fancy this, because I think he's definitely not a driver that would hang about. Like, I just think he's got so much going on in his life. He's got so many projects or things he wants to try that I think if he didn't genuinely believe or get himself going again to go and have another tilt at it, I just don't think he would bother. So I think while actually what's become of Lando is that contentment's going to make him a more potent force going forward. And I think we probably won't see that so much this year just because of the natural pecking order that we're seeing. But I think that contentment that Laura really eloquently described is actually going to make him a great driver for the next 10 years. And I think that's what is quite exciting about the future. If we see Kimi coming through, if McLaren do develop, which I'm sure they will do, a car that will be able to fight for wins, if Lewis is kind of fighting back as well, if Charles gets his mojo back, if George finds it, and Max at Red Bull, we could have a really cool fight at the end of this year, and we've got hungry drivers who want to kind of stamp their authority on it.
I think there'll be individual races. Dealing with McLaren, I feel they've hemorrhaged too many points to think about winning the Constructors' Championship this year. I feel that they're too far back. What are they, 118 to Mercedes 244?
But I feel everyone will be chasing a win towards the end of the season.
So I think
because
each race will become a World Cup, World Cup final.
And I love that analogy, because then it just every race feels kind of all or nothing for these drivers, and that's wonderful for us, isn't it?
Look, final thing, driver of the day. I mean, there's a few we haven't mentioned as well. I'm thinking of double points for Racing Bulls. Okay, we touched on them having their swim earlier, but Lawson and Lindblad, P5, P6, both career bests. Gasly in the points again for Alpine with P7. Him furious, of course, because of the pit lane speeding. Albon, Ocon in the points. Alonso getting that first point for Aston Martin as well. I mean, there are so many storylines. Actually, is what we were saying, wasn't it, right at the top of the show? But right, driver of the day, Laura, welcome back. Who is it for you? Is it one of the people lower down in the points, or is it perhaps someone we've been eulogising about?
Gosh, can I be really obvious?
Yeah.
It's so hard to look past him. Sorry, Lawrence. It's going to have to be Kimi Antonelli.
You don't have to say sorry to me.
Well, no, you have to go second, and I've taken Kimi. But he's made history around Monaco. 5th win on the bounce. He's just operating at a level that we have not seen. We're talking about generational talent, and we're 6 races into the season. It has to be him.
I think it's perfectly acceptable for us to all agree, to be honest, because I think to your point, the performance he's delivered this weekend is not the kind of thing we're going to see at Monaco every year, or nor is it going to be the kind of thing that we'll see at many race weekends this year, where it's that perfect combination of Kimi being on another planet and able to deliver that kind of performance. And there were phases in that race where, I think you mentioned right at the beginning, Tom, he was 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds quicker, probably not even pushing still, because he will always drive within a margin, because I think he's sensible enough to know that he can't bin it. So, because that was the other thing, is Kimi never really went up against the barriers. Like, he never really pushed the limit, and I think that's another growth point thrown in right at the end. And I think that's why this weekend was so special. So yeah, easy.
Well, hey, let's all agree, Kimi Antonelli was the driver of the day, in Monaco. He's just getting better and better every weekend, I feel. Yeah, there They're just little things that he does better every single weekend, and it's now 5 in a row. People listening to this don't want agreement the whole time. Let's do a sort of mention in dispatches, right? We all agree that Kimi Antonelli was the driver of the day. Let's now each name a driver who impressed us who's not Kimi Antonelli.
I'm going to say Isaac Hadjar, and not just because we are on the Red Bull Energy Station, and I feel we'd have to run off if we don't mention him, but because he dealt with a car that was seemingly getting more and more difficult to drive around one of the circuits that is the most demanding for drivers to drive. He crashed, came back from that, kept a level head, through into qualifying, qualified well. Yeah, Isaac Hadjar, podium in Monaco, that is so special. Well done to him.
I'm going to go a bit left field, and I'm going to say Checo. Now, I know he has lost the point that would have been Cadillac's first point, but I think he's really just generally impressed me so far this year, and even from that phase on Friday where he was 13th, 14th in practice in a Cadillac, I think the performance he delivered, I know he made a couple of mistakes today where, parked up in the wrong grid box, but I think he put himself in the mix, and that's exactly what Cadillac brought him back to the sport for, and I think that he's exactly the kind of driver that they're going to want going forward. So I think a really good job from him, not just today but the whole weekend.
Are you surprised by the gap between Checo Perez and Valtteri Bottas this year?
I think on paper the gap looks big, but I think if you talk to people in the team, if you talk to Dan Tyrrell, to Graham Loudon, they'll tell you that both of them are doing a really good job. They're doing the kind of thing that they wanted from experienced drivers, and I think maybe Valtteri just hasn't maybe had the rub of the green. I probably am a little bit more surprised that Perez has had the edge, given that Valtteri was around with Mercedes as a reserve last year. He did a bit of driving, whereas Checo went on holiday to Africa with his family, had a year off and kind of really took his foot off the gas and had to get back in the gym. But then it makes me rethink about, well, what kind of Checo did we see at Red Bull, and actually was there the Checo of when he finished runner-up, and is that who the real Checo is? So I think it's great we've got another shot at looking at him, and I'm still waiting and going to give Valtteri more time to settle into clearly a car that is taking time to get the best out of. They've had so many niggles, haven't they, that you'd expect a new team to have. So let's give him more time, but I'm loving the Checo that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and I'm going to say Liam Lawson. I love watching him in quali. You don't drive sideways, around Monaco, but he proved that you can. And he put it P10 on the grid, and he's gone and got that P5 in the race, equaling his best from Baku last year. So it's really, let's not forget that you only have to go back 18 months or less actually to Liam having that horrible time at the start of last year, promoted to Red Bull, then 2 races later he's pushed back to Racing Bulls, and the way he's bounced back from that, hasn't let it, I'm sure there's been dark moments, but hasn't let it get to him, and I feel he's just proving what I think Helmut Marko saw him in back in the day, that he is a seriously good racing driver, and what he did in Monaco this weekend proved that. Well guys, thank you. Before we go, while we've had a great weekend of drama on the streets of Monaco, we've also had the very exciting news that we're going to continue racing at another street circuit for a long time to come. That's because it's been announced that Formula One will continue racing in Las Vegas through to 2037 after a 10-year extension has been agreed. I mean, there are a lot of long deals in Formula One, but Vegas, baby, I mean, how excited are we by not only the length of the agreement, but I feel Vegas is becoming a modern day classic. Great news, huh?
Great news, and it's incredible that we're saying that after only 3 races, right, that they've hosted there. But I think what is exciting about that is we've had 3 great races at that track. It is a proper racing track that is entertaining for multiple reasons, and I think that's why it's great that they've got this long deal, because it means they can invest in the infrastructure, they can kind of invest in innovation, they can make this event even better. And like they always say, don't they, Las Vegas is the sport and entertainment capital of the world, and they've delivered that so far. So I think to have those kind of races on the calendar is a great thing for Formula One.
And year on year, the action on track has been amazing, but it also is getting better and better and better as an event as well. They've shifted the schedule, and now it just felt last season like the perfect backdrop for the end of season drama that we saw, the fight that we saw, the drama of the McLaren disqualification, and it just looks incredible, doesn't it, under the lights? You can't deny it. So yeah, roll on Las Vegas for the next 11 years.
Well guys, thank you very much wonderful to have you both on the show.
Loved it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Great. And for more reaction and analysis from here in Monaco, please go to f1.com, the official F1 app, and at F1 on social media. And do check out F1's other official podcasts as well. My guest this week on F1 Beyond the Grid is Alex Albon as he prepares to surpass Nigel Mansell as the driver with the most race starts in Williams history. That's out on Wednesday on the Beyond the Grid feed, and you can watch our chat on the F1 YouTube channel as well. And F1 TV lead commentator Alex Jakes is answering your questions on the latest F1 Explains podcast. That's just below this show on the F1 Nation feed. So thanks very much for listening. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the Barcelona-Catalunya Grand Prix, but for now, F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.